The night my wedding cake collapsed in a smear of red and white frosting should have been the worst moment of my life. Instead, it became the most expensive lesson I ever paid for and the most satisfying one. Because sprawled at the center of that ruined masterpiece was my own sister, unconscious, exposed, and finally unable to hide what she'd done. But to understand how it came to that, you need to know what led us there. My name is Elena Moore. I was 29, a senior marketing strategist at a Charleston firm that valued control, precision, and calm under pressure. Those traits weren't just professional skills. They were survival tools I'd learned growing up. My younger sister Harper, 27, was my opposite in every way. She called herself a lifestyle influencer. What that really meant was curated photos, borrowed designer bags, and a life financed by credit cards she pretended didn't exist. She had tens of thousands of followers who admired her freedom, but none of them knew she was drowning in debt and still relying on our parents to rescue her. They always had, no matter what I achieved, scholarships, promotions, independence. It never seemed to matter as much as Harper's moods. If she smiled, the house felt peaceful. If she cried, it was my fault. That pattern followed us into adulthood. Then I met Julian. He was a surgical resident with steady hands and a quiet confidence that made people trust him instantly. But what truly unsettled Harper wasn't his career or his kindness. It was his family name. Old Charleston money. Generations of influence. The kind of world Harper had always wanted access to but never earned. From the moment we got engaged, her behavior changed. She inserted herself into every decision. The venue. The guest list. The aesthetic. She framed it as help, but it always came back to appearances. What would people think? How would it look online? Would this wedding elevate her image? When I refused to replace my best friend as maid of honor, she ran straight to our parents. Within hours, I was cornered in my apartment, listening to familiar lines about family generosity and not ruining my sister's happiness. I gave in. That was my first mistake. The second came when Harper demanded I pay for her dress, an absurdly expensive silk gown she chose without asking. I told myself it was easier than fighting. Easier than reopening old wounds. But every concession fed something darker. By the time the wedding day arrived, everything looked flawless. Chandeliers. Ivory linens. A 6-tier red velvet cake trimmed with edible gold. Perfection from the outside. What I didn't know then was that Harper hadn't come to celebrate, she'd come to sabotage me. And she'd planned it carefully. I didn't realize my sister's plan involved a drugged glass until one 5-word text changed everything. The ceremony itself went smoothly. Almost too smoothly. I remember thinking that maybe I had been wrong about Harper. Maybe all the tension, all the small warning signs, were just old habits I hadn't learned to let go of yet. She stood near the front, smiling brightly, her posture perfect, her eyes sparkling for every camera pointed her way. Julian squeezed my hand as we walked back down the aisle, and the applause washed over us like a warm tide. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe the hardest part was over. To the reception, Harper floated between tables, accepting compliments that weren't meant for her. She laughed loudly, toasted often, and never seemed to let her champagne flute empty. I noticed distantly that she kept refilling it herself instead of letting the staff handle it. Then my phone vibrated. It was a text from my college friend Maya, who had arrived late and was seated near the bar. Don't drink anything Harper gives you. 5 words. No explanation. I frowned, rereading the message as if the meaning might change. Across the room, Harper caught my eye and lifted her glass toward me, already moving in my direction. The timing was too precise to ignore. She reached me with a wide smile. You must be exhausted, she said sweetly. Here. Champagne. You deserve it. I glanced down. The glass was already poured. I'm good, I said lightly. I need water. Her smile flickered. Just for a second. Come on, she pressed. It's your wedding. Something cold settled in my stomach. I took the glass anyway, holding it just long enough to avoid suspicion, then set it on a nearby table. When she turned away, I didn't drink it. 10 minutes later, I watched Harper sway. At first, it looked like excitement. Then clumsiness. Her steps grew uneven, her laughter too loud, her words slurring around the edges. Julian leaned in. Is she okay? Before I could answer, Harper tripped. Not a dramatic fall, just enough to draw attention. Staff rushed over. Guests whispered. She waved them off, insisting she was fine, but her pupils were blown wide, her movements delayed. Then she reached for the cake table. Tea happened fast. Her hand hit the edge. The 6-tier cake tipped. Plates shattered. Frosting exploded across the floor in a red and white mess that looked disturbingly like blood. Harper went down with it. The room erupted. Gasps. Shouts. Phones raised instantly. Someone screamed for help. Someone else called her name. She didn't respond as paramedics were called. Maya appeared at my side, face pale. Elena, she whispered. I saw her slip something into your glass earlier. I think she mixed them up. My breath caught. Because if she had planned for me to drink that champagne, then the person lying unconscious on the floor wasn't the intended victim. And that realization changed everything. When the hospital toxicology report came back, it confirmed what I feared and exposed a lie my family could never cover up. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. I sat beside Julian, my wedding dress still stained with frosting, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across from us, my parents paced back and forth, whispering urgently while avoiding my eyes. No one asked if I was okay. No one apologized. Their entire focus was on Harper. A doctor eventually approached, clipboard tucked under his arm. His tone was calm, practiced, the kind that prepares you for news you won't like. He asked who immediate family was. My parents stepped forward instantly. I followed. She's stable, he said, but we found substances in her system that shouldn't be there. My mother's face drained of color. What kind of substances? He listed them carefully. A sedative. A fast-acting anti-anxiety drug. Not lethal on their own, but dangerous when mixed with alcohol. Enough to cause dizziness, impaired judgment, and eventual loss of consciousness. The hallway went silent. This wasn't accidental, the doctor continued. These medications don't enter the bloodstream without being administered. My father cleared his throat. Could she have taken them herself? That's possible, the doctor replied evenly. But given the circumstances, a report will be filed. My mother turned to me then, eyes sharp with accusation. This is because of you, she said. You stressed her out. You always do this. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words felt unreal, like something pulled from a script I'd already memorized. Maya stepped forward before I could respond. I need to say something, she said firmly. She held up her phone. I saw Hopper put something into Elena's drink earlier. I didn't understand what I was seeing until now. My parents froze, and my father demanded proof. Maya played the video. 10 seconds. Harper at the bar. Her hand slipping a small white tablet into a champagne flute. My mother sat down hard in a plastic chair. No one looked at me after that. Harper woke hours later confused and angry, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. She said she'd mixed medications by accident. She said she never meant to hurt anyone. But the toxicology report didn't support her story, and neither did the footage. The next morning, my parents pulled me aside. Their voices dropped into urgent whispers. They begged me not to involve the police. Not to tell Julian's family. Not to let this become public. Think about her future, my mother pleaded. One mistake shouldn't ruin her life. I looked at them and finally understood something that had taken me years to see. They weren't asking me to forgive her. They were asking me to protect her. I'm done, I said quietly. And as I walked away, I knew the next choice I made would change everything. I didn't call the police, but what I did instead cost my family far more than silence ever could. I didn't call the police. Not because Harper didn't deserve consequences, but because I knew exactly how my family worked. They would turn it into a war of excuses, tears, and rewritten memories. If I wanted real accountability, I needed something quieter, cleaner, and impossible to argue with. I called a lawyer. Not a dramatic one. Not the kind who chased headlines. I chose someone methodical, the kind who dealt in documentation and timelines. I handed over everything. The toxicology report. Maya's video. The witness statements from staff who remembered Harper insisting on serving drinks herself. Then I waited. While Harper recovered at home, my parents tried to resume control. My mother sent long messages about healing and unity. My father suggested therapy, framed as something we should all do together. They spoke like this was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with effort and silence. I didn't respond. 2 weeks later, my lawyer sent formal notices. One to my parents. One to Harper. They outlined the facts clearly, unemotionally. What happened? What evidence existed? What options were available? One line mattered more than the rest. Any attempt to shift blame or suppress information will result in formal charges. My phone rang within minutes. My mother cried. My father yelled. Harper screamed that I was ruining her life. She said I was dramatic. That it was an accident. That I should have protected her. I told her she stopped being my responsibility the moment she tried to drug me. That night, Julian and I talked longer than we ever had. Not about the wedding. About boundaries. About family. About what our future would look like without constant chaos orbiting it. He didn't pressure me. He just listened. And then he said something simple. I'll support whatever keeps us safe. That was when I knew I was making the right choice. The legal pressure worked faster than I expected. My parents hired a private mediator, desperate to keep everything out of public records. Harper was required to enter a treatment program and sign a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It wasn't forgiveness. It was containment. The wedding photos were quietly edited. Harper was removed from most of them. The cake incident was blamed on a medical emergency in public, though the truth circulated anyway. Charleston loves whispers. Invitations stopped coming. Calls slowed. The constant pull of obligation finally loosened. I wasn't celebrated. I wasn't praised. But I was left alone. And for the first time, that felt like peace. I realized then that power didn't come from confrontation. It came from preparation. From knowing your limits and enforcing them without apology. Because the hardest part wasn't Stan. I thought the silence meant it was finished. 4 weeks, no one called. No messages slipped through mutual relatives. No carefully worded apologies arrived disguised as concern. Life settled into something almost normal, and I began to believe the worst had passed. Then the envelope arrived. It wasn't plain this time. Thick paper. Legal letterhead. My parents' names printed neatly at the top, as if presentation could soften what followed. I opened it slowly, already bracing myself. They wanted money. Not a loan, not help, not support. Compensation. According to the letter, the wedding incident had caused significant emotional distress to Harper and reputational damage to the family. They believed I bore partial responsibility for escalating the situation and demanded I contribute financially to Harper's recovery and future stability. I read it twice, then laughed out loud. They hadn't learned anything. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer without responding. Within an hour, he called me. He wasn't surprised. He told me families who lose control often try one last grasp, hoping guilt will succeed where authority failed. They're testing you, he said. If you pay, it resets everything. I didn't hesitate. Then we shut it down. That afternoon, he drafted a response. Precise. Cold. Final. It stated that any further financial demands would be considered harassment. It reminded them of the documented evidence already on record. It clarified that I owed them nothing legally or otherwise. The reply was sent certified. The reaction was immediate. My mother left a voicemail so frantic it barely made sense. She accused me of cruelty, of abandonment, of choosing money over blood. My father sent a message saying I'd gone too far this time. Harper posted a vague story online about betrayal and selfish people who expose private struggles for attention. I blocked all of them. Not out of anger but necessity. Once the noise stopped, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. Not relieved exactly, but steady. Like I'd finally put something heavy down after carrying it far too long. Julian noticed before I did. He said I laughed more easily. Slept deeper. Stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. We talked about rebuilding the wedding memories on our own terms. A small trip. Just us. No audience. No obligations. I realized then how much space my family had occupied in my life. How many decisions I'd filtered through their reactions. How often I'd mistaken tolerance for love. Letting go wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Intentional. Necessary. Weeks passed. The legal threats stopped. The whispers faded. Without my participation, the story lost energy. People moved on as they always do. But my family didn't reach out again. And for the first time, I understood that endings don't always come with closure. Sometimes they come with freedom. I thought walking away would break me, but what came next showed me who I was without them. Equals after everything ended, life didn't explode into happiness the way stories promise. It softened instead. Days became quieter, mornings steadier, and the constant tension I'd lived with for years slowly loosened its grip. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped rehearsing conversations that would never happen. Julian and I postponed the honeymoon we'd originally planned. Not out of sadness but intention. We wanted distance from expectations, from whispers, from the version of us shaped by other people's demands. A month later, we left quietly for a small coastal town where no one knew our names. We walked barefoot on empty beaches, ate cheap food, and talked about the future without filtering our words. When we returned, we didn't try to fix what was broken. My parents never apologized. Harper never took responsibility. The silence stretched, then settled. At first it hurt. Then it healed. I realized I didn't miss them as much as I missed who I thought they could be. Work flourished in unexpected ways. With fewer emotional emergencies draining me, I focused better. I was promoted within 6 months. Not because of luck but clarity. I stopped doubting myself. I trusted my instincts. I spoke up in meetings without shrinking. Julian noticed the change too. He said I stood taller. That my laugh sounded freer. We built routines that belonged only to us. Sunday breakfasts. Evening walks. Conversations that didn't revolve around damage control. Occasionally, I heard updates through distant relatives. Harper bounced between projects, never staying long. My parents complained about how difficult things had become. I listened politely, then changed the subject. Their chaos no longer lived inside me. I learned something important during that time. Walking away isn't about punishment. It's about protection. It's choosing peace over proof, boundaries over explanations. It's understanding that love doesn't require endurance. People often ask if I regret not pressing charges. The answer surprises them. No. What I did was enough. I protected myself, my marriage, and my future. I refused to be a shield for someone else's destruction. My wedding day wasn't ruined. It was clarified. It showed me who would stand beside me when things got ugly and who expected me to stay quiet for their comfort. That knowledge was worth more than perfect photos or polite memories. Some endings are loud and public. Mine wasn't. It happened in decisions made quietly, consistently, and without apology. If you're standing at the edge of a choice that feels cruel but necessary, know this. Choosing yourself doesn't make you selfish. It makes you honest. And sometimes, honesty is the only thing that finally sets you free. Freedom didn't arrive as applause or approval. It arrived as calm nights, clear mornings, and decisions made without fear. It arrived when I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead. The life I built afterward wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that ownership changed everything in ways I'm still discovering slowly, deliberately, without regret or hesitation ever.